Have you ever been around someone who is just completely unbothered? They're not rushing, they're not worried, they're not overthinking anything. They show up late, laugh it off, say it'll work out, and somehow they're totally fine with that. And instead of feeling relaxed around them, you feel irritated. Not just a little annoyed, but deeply uncomfortable because while they're calm, your brain is running through everything that could go wrong. And you're sitting there thinking, how are you not thinking about this?
And if you're honest, it's not just confusion, it's judgment. You start questioning their standards, their awareness, their level of responsibility. You think, someone has to be thinking about this, and clearly it's not going to be them. So what happens? You step in, you plan ahead, you carry the details, and you make sure that nothing gets missed. And now, instead of just being around a chill person, you're responsible for both of you. Most people would look at this and say, it's just a personality difference. Type A versus type B, structured versus relaxed, driven versus easygoing. But that explanation is way too shallow for what's actually happening here, because your reaction isn't neutral. It's emotional, and it's immediate and strong. That's not just preference. That's a pattern being activated. Because when you see someone operating without urgency or planning, without visible concern, your brain doesn't interpret that as calm. It interprets it as risk.
And that's why this hits deeper than people expect. You're not reacting to them as a person. You're reacting to what their behavior represents to you. It feels like things are being left open, unaccounted for, or ignored. And if you're someone who has built your identity around being responsible, prepared, and aware, that's incredibly uncomfortable to sit in. So it's not that you don't like chill people, it's that their way of operating clashes directly with the way you've learned to feel safe. For a lot of type A women, this didn't start as a personality, it started as a response. At some point, being the one who thought ahead, planned ahead, and handled things well wasn't optional. It was necessary. Maybe things were chaotic, maybe expectations were high, maybe you learned early that if you didn't stay on top of things, something would fall through the cracks. So you adapted. You became the one who noticed, who prepared, who followed through. And over time, that didn't just become something you did, it became who you are.
And here's the part that people miss. That adaptation worked. It got results. It created stability, it built trust, and it made you capable in a way that most people aren't. So of course your brain keeps using it. But now when you're around someone who doesn't operate that way, it creates friction because they're not reinforcing the system that you've relied on for so long. They're not scanning for problems. They're not preparing for outcomes. And your brain goes, wait, are we just not going to handle this? And this is where it starts to show up in really practical ways. You're thinking about timing. They're saying, we'll figure it out. You're planning logistics. They're saying, it's not a big deal. You're trying to get ahead of something and they're completely comfortable waiting. And instead of meeting in the middle, what usually happens is you move toward them by taking on more. You don't actually become more relaxed, you just become more responsible.
And this is exactly what people on the outside are reacting to, even if they don't understand it. There's this perception that type A people are anxious, intense, or always making things feel more urgent than they need to be. And I've even seen people say things like, why are you worried about something that's not happening for a week? But what they're missing is this. You're not trying to create pressure. You're trying to prevent problems. Those are two very different things. But from the outside, they can look the same. The tension isn't actually between you and chill people. It's between two different definitions of safety. For you, safety comes from preparation, from thinking ahead, from knowing that things are handled before they become problems. For them, safety comes from flexibility, from trusting that things will work out, even if they're not fully planned.
Neither one is inherently wrong, but when you don't recognize that difference, it turns quickly into frustration. You think they're careless. They think you're too intense. You think they're missing things. They think you're overthinking everything. And both of you walk away feeling incredibly misunderstood because you're not actually solving the same problem. You're operating from completely different assumptions about how things should be handled. So here's the shift, and this is where we reframe type A in the right way. Your tendency to think ahead, plan, prepare, That's not the problem. That's a strength. It's why things get done, and it's why details don't get missed, and it's why people trust you with important things. The problem is when your strength becomes your only mode, when you assume that your way is the only way things can work.
Because the truth is, not everything requires your level of intensity. Not every situation needs to be optimized, solved, or handled ahead of time. When you treat everything like it does, you end up carrying more than you need to. Again, the goal isn't to become a chill person. That's not who you are. The goal is to recognize when your strength is actually needed and when it's just being over-applied. So here's your challenge this week. The next time you feel that irritation rise up, the "why are they not thinking about this" feeling, I don't want you to immediately step in and take over. Pause and ask yourself, is this actually a problem right now or just something I'm used to solving early?
And if it's not a real problem yet, let it sit. Let someone else handle it their way. Let it be a little less optimized, a little less controlled. Not forever, not for everything, but enough to prove to yourself that things don't always fall apart just because you didn't step in first. Here's what most type A women realize when they start pulling back in these moments. They were never wrong for caring about the details.
They just didn't need to carry every single one of them.
And if this is hitting home, make sure you're subscribed because this is exactly what we're unpacking here.
And if you haven't watched the video on why you're carrying too much, start there because this is another layer of that same pattern.
We'll see you in the next one.